650 young women tortured to death. Their blood drained into baths. A Hungarian countess who believed bathing in virgin blood would keep her young forever. This isn't a horror movie. This actually happened. Her name was Elizabeth Báthory, and she makes every fictional vampire look tame. She tortured more people than Jack the Ripper, Ted Bundy, and Jeffrey Dahmer combined. And the most terrifying part, modern historians think she might have been innocent. This is the true story behind Dracula. You won't believe how they covered it up.
Welcome to Historical Nightmare.
I'm about to tell you the story that inspired every vampire movie you've ever seen. But unlike Dracula, Elizabeth Báthory was real. Unlike vampire fiction, her victims were real. And unlike movie monsters, she was never actually proven guilty.
August 7th, 1560. Near Bátor, Hungary. A baby girl is born into one of Europe's most powerful families. Her uncle is the King of Poland. Her family controls Transylvania. Yes, that Transylvania. Her name? Elizabeth Báthory. She has no idea that this name will become synonymous with the most prolific female serial killer in history. Or that centuries later, people will whisper her name in the same breath as Dracula himself.
But here's what makes this case absolutely chilling. The Báthory family wasn't just rich and powerful. They were completely insane. Elizabeth's uncle taught her about Satanism. Her aunt introduced her to torture and sadomasochism. At age 6, little Elizabeth watched a public execution. She didn't cry. She didn't look away. According to witnesses, she smiled. At 15, Elizabeth married Count Ferenc Nadasdy in 1575. As a wedding gift, they received Chaktice Castle in Slovakia, a fortress that would become her private house of horrors. Her husband was just as cruel as she was. He built her a custom torture chamber to her exact specifications. But Ferenc was often away fighting wars against the Ottoman Empire, and Elizabeth got bored easily. What happened next changed everything. One day, a servant girl was combing Elizabeth's hair when she pulled too hard. Elizabeth, now in her 30s, flew into a rage and struck the servant so violently that blood splattered across her hand. When another servant rushed to clean it, Elizabeth noticed something incredible. Her skin looked younger where the blood had touched it. That's when Elizabeth Báthory made a discovery that would damn 650 souls. She believed blood was the secret to eternal youth. What followed were 20 years of unspeakable horror. She would beat servant girls with heavy wooden sticks until they died, burn them with red-hot irons, drive needles under their fingernails, force them into ice baths in winter, and leave them to freeze to death. But that wasn't the worst part. Elizabeth became convinced that virgin blood was the purest, the most effective for preserving her beauty. She would have girls brought to special chambers, hung upside down naked, their throats slashed. Elizabeth would stand beneath them as their life drained away, bathing in their blood. The servants called her the Blood Countess in terrified whispers. For years, Elizabeth's victims were peasant girls, servants, the poor and powerless. She would send recruiters into villages with promises of good jobs at the castle. Young girls, desperate to feed their families, would volunteer. They were never seen again. Bodies were buried at night in secret graveyards. Some were thrown into rivers or burned in castle furnaces. Here's what makes this truly terrifying. The local authorities looked the other way. After all, who cared about dead peasants? But Elizabeth got greedy. She wanted purer blood from higher-born victims. She began targeting daughters of the lesser nobility, girls sent to her castle to learn court etiquette. That was her fatal mistake. By 1610, rumors were spreading across Hungary. King Matthias II couldn't ignore it when noble families started losing their daughters. He sent György Thurzo, the highest-ranking official in Hungary, to investigate. On December 29, 1610, Thurzo arrived at Countess castle with armed soldiers. Elizabeth was having dinner when they burst in. What they found defies imagination. One girl already dead, another girl barely alive, tortured and bleeding, bodies in various stages of decomposition throughout the castle. And Elizabeth was calm, too calm, as if she'd been expecting them. Over 300 witnesses testified against the Blood Countess, servants who had helped bury bodies, villagers who had seen girls enter the castle but never leave, castle staff who described rooms splattered with blood. One servant testified that Elizabeth kept a book, a ledger with the names of all her victims. 650 names, 650 young women and girls, tortured and murdered for vanity. Elizabeth's accomplices faced swift justice. 2 female servants had their fingers torn off by red-hot pincers, then were burned alive. The male servant was beheaded. A witch who had helped Elizabeth was burned at the stake. But Elizabeth herself, she was too powerful to execute. Instead, they gave her a punishment worse than death. She was walled up alive in her own castle. Stonemasons sealed her into her chambers. Windows were bricked over. Doors were sealed shut. Only small openings remained, one for air, one for food. Elizabeth Báthory, who had bathed in blood, was buried alive. For 3.5 years, she remained in that living tomb, alone, in darkness. On August 21st, 1614, a guard found her lying face down on the floor, dead at 54. But here's where this story gets absolutely shocking. Modern historians believe Elizabeth Báthory might have been completely innocent. Think about it. King Matthias owed Elizabeth's family an enormous debt. Her arrest conveniently canceled that debt. Many witnesses never actually saw her commit crimes. They only repeated rumors. Her servants confessed under torture, making their testimony worthless. Here's the smoking gun. Of 289 witness accounts, more than 250 offered either hearsay or no information whatsoever. The testimony that Elizabeth had listed 650 victims came from a servant who claimed a court official had seen this in Elizabeth's private book. But the official who supposedly saw this information never testified. The book was never found. What if Elizabeth Báthory was the victim of the most successful character assassination in history? What if powerful men wanted her vast wealth and lands? What if the Blood Countess legend was Tudor-style propaganda designed to destroy a woman who was too powerful, too wealthy, and too independent? Consider this. Elizabeth's imprisonment allowed her sons-in-law to seize control of her fortune. They knew beforehand that her arrest was coming. The Habsburg court owed her money they didn't want to pay. And Elizabeth's support of her nephew, who was in conflict with the ruling Habsburgs, made her a political threat. But here's the most chilling part. The blood-bathing stories. They first appeared 100 years after Elizabeth's death. None of the contemporary witness accounts mention bloodbaths. The vampire legend was created later, possibly to make the false charges seem more believable. The woman who inspired Dracula might never have spilled a drop of blood. Today, Chaktice Castle still stands in Slovakia as a tourist attraction. Visitors pay to see the torture chambers where Elizabeth supposedly committed her crimes. The legend has become more profitable than the truth. Just like with the princes in the tower, powerful institutions benefit from maintaining historical lies. Think about this. If they could destroy Elizabeth Báthory's reputation so completely that we still believe the lies 400 years later, what other historical facts are actually character assassinations? How many other powerful women were eliminated by having their reputations destroyed rather than their bodies? This isn't just about medieval Hungary. This is about how the powerful eliminate threats. They don't always use swords or poison. Sometimes they use stories. They create legends so terrifying that people never question whether they're true. Elizabeth Báthory's real crime wasn't murder. It was being a woman with too much power in a man's world. The Blood Countess who inspired Dracula, who allegedly bathed in virgin blood, who supposedly tortured 650 women to death, might have been the first victim of a coordinated disinformation campaign. Her story became the template for every female monster in fiction. The real monsters were the men who destroyed her to steal her fortune. That's historical nightmare, where we expose the lies powerful people hoped you'd never question. If this 400-year-old conspiracy shocked you, hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started uncovering history's greatest cover-ups. Drop a comment. Do you think Elizabeth Báthory was a serial killer or the victim of a medieval smear campaign? And what other historical villains might actually be innocent? Until next time, remember, history is written by the winners. And sometimes, the winners are the real villains. And if this story feels familiar, it should. Powerful people still destroy their enemies with false accusations and character assassination. The methods change, but the strategy remains the same.